What was your first encounter with the meme machine that is Alex Jones?
It was the early 2000s.
Really? Wow.
And I remember just thinking, who the fuck is this guy, and why does he shout every single word that he says? He's like, he lives his life in caps lock.
The globalists, yeah. A lot of the Infowars stuff that you kind of knew right from day one, this is horse shit, but there's nuggets of truth being dropped in amongst the rest of the horse shit. And I think unless your brain wasn't critically set up correctly, you would just fall for all of it.
That's exactly what RT does. It's the same MO, which is that they're trying to create a world where you can't be sure of anything. And Alex Jones is exactly the same. You can't quite be sure of anything. If this thing's true, is this thing's true? Is this thing true? I mean, but as time has gone by, he's obviously become much more financially dependent. He's become much more affluent on it, and now it's all brain
to understand where it's come from. You can go even further back to like JFK, Ruby Ridge, Waco. These things where it does look like there might have been some.
But JFK's another one, right, where my small conspiracy of convenience theory comes in, right? Because the best theory I've ever heard of what happened with JFK is that what happened is that the guy in the car in front heard a Harvey Oswald shot, span around, and his gun went off by accident, and that's the second shot.
The reason why no one could ever replicate the shots Oswald did was because he didn't fire the shot that killed it. And the whole conspiracy is not covering up the CIA or anything like this. It's basically the national embarrassment that one of those fucking security guys killed the president. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, that's it. That is exactly what fucking happened, because it's the most realistic human explanation. Next time you watch the Sabruter film, just go, Oswald shot, dipstick turned around and tried to kill Oswald and fucking takes out Kennedy's head.
Yeah. And it's all there on the film, and it's been right there.
True, like, the whole time. At work, when you like screw something up by mistake, that's when you're least likely to own up to it. You're like, I didn't cover that up.
Yeah, the thing is, you can imagine at the time that they have no future knowledge of the fact of how big a thing this is going to be.
It's the most convincing conspiracy theory I've ever heard in my life.
Absolutely, that somebody would conspire to cover up a massive fucking cock-up. Because that's all governments ever do.
That's politics, man. That's politics on a way.
The face of a colossal cock-up, their first instinct is to try and pretend it hasn't happened and hope that nobody finds out. That's the Sir Humphrey Appleby thing of, you should always tell the press everything that they can definitely find out by themselves from other sources. And no more.
Love it. It does start with Kennedy, but like there are the more serious ones, the Gulf of Tonkin and so forth. There are the ones that are kind of true. So that's my kind of overall broad take on it.
There is a group of like people, particularly in America, who will question things, but they'll just look for the first thing that is an alternative view. I don't know if you've ever heard of this thing I think it's called Argyra, and it's if you take too much silver, you actually turn blue. Your skin turns completely blue. So there was a libertarian politician who believed that if you like consumed silver, it would be good for your body because it is a natural antibiotic or something like that.
Yes.
It does kill bacteria.
You get silver solution that you can use as a sort of spray on to help
put it in plasters and stuff like that. Folk thought you could make it yourself and just consume it, so there's all these blue people kicking their feet. Like Papa Smurf type blue.
Oh well.
And then Alex Jones, he sells like colloidal silver solution, he's like breathe it in or whatever, so you'd get all these kind of crazy things where it's like the alternative. Oh, you're being sold a lie, so this is the truth. And it's like another version of bollocks.
Donald Trump has been on Infowars.
Yeah.
That terrifies the fuck out of me, that like how, the actual sitting president of the United States has not only got on it, but complimented it and told Alex what an awesome guy and an honest man and doing great work here, Alex. And you never see the BBC or ITV or Sky. No one runs with that story. Going, look, this motherfucker said the Sandy Hook school shooting was a hoax. That's horrendous.
Yep.
And the sitting president of the United States right now was on his show telling him how great he was.
The only decent news coverage in this country of Donald Trump is Channel 4.
I think Infowars would be a good subject matter for them to kind of address.
Well, they do deep dives because I think they're actually more like a good high-end American cable news show, because instead of the kind of, you've basically got a 50-minute news show where everybody else's news block is a half hour. And instead of just having, here's the headlines and here's what's in the papers and blah, 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 they actually have, they'll have a couple of people on for a debate and they'll have deep dives on things. And then on a Friday, you do have the Unreported World, where you'll have a half-hour documentary at the end of the news about something horrendous that's going on somewhere. I have to admit, I normally switch off the bat. I know enough about all the horrendous things going on in the world. I don't need more in my brain. But it's actually trying to be news, to inform, whereas I just feel like the rest of the news is
it is interesting. They do stuff. People kind of say like, the BBC, what if we didn't have it or whatever. They don't really think about what if it never existed. What would you have now? You would might have like 3 or 4 Channel 4 type systems.
Well, the thing is, I like the Channel 4 system. The Channel 4 system is that it's owned essentially by it's owned by the state. It's owned by us, but it's funded by advertising. So that's the model that works.
I like that model of being a mutual or a cooperative.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not one guy controlling the whole thing who can decide the whole editorial position of the organisation, or a government even for that matter, deciding what it should do.
So it's an argument to be made that because the BBC has been so bad, and other media outlets that are not Channel 4, because they have failed, that's allowed RT and Infowars to fill the void.
I think certainly, because there's a perception, and it's interesting, in the build-up to the referendum, there's obviously, there were protests outside the BBC, because I think people saw for the first time the man behind the curtain to a certain extent. Whereas before, the BBC had just been the BBC and nobody really gave it a great deal of thought. All of a sudden, it was quite obvious that they weren't being entirely politically fair, right? And it wasn't. I think the mistake that people made again is assuming that it was some grand unionist conspiracy, and I don't think it was. I think it was just to do with the way they're used to thinking about politics, which is that you give equal time to all. So from their point of view, you give equal time to the SNP and the Greens and the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, and you therefore have an automatic imbalance because 3 out of the 5 are pro one direction. You also have the fact that Labour was the hegemony in politics in Scotland for years. Therefore, for any journalists building themselves up a useful set of contacts, they were going to be Labour politicians. They were the useful contacts. But the nature of that is that over time they become friends. And so then it becomes quite difficult. And journalists never want to think that they're biased, but we've all got our biases. And the worst person is the person that doesn't take their own biases into account, because they want to believe that they're being impartial and that they're being fair, and they don't see that they're not. It's not a grand conspiracy. It's something much more subtle than that. It's to do with tone. But once people had seen it, it meant that people started to walk away from BBC News. And for all of its faults, it is actually relatively accurate on the facts, generally speaking, but it's tone that's the issue, shall we say. And they moved to RT because at the time RT was covering the independence movement in a way that the BBC was not. So, you'd have a massive parade, a massive fucking thing going on in Glasgow town centre, and you'd get one shitey wee article on the BBC with a photograph of 3 people that made it look like there was no one there. Right, and they did do that. We all know they did that. And then RT would have a 15-minute segment on it live from there. And the problem then is that made people think, what, actually, RT's all right. And they start watching RT and all the other poison seeds.
They don't think about the agenda.
Yes, they see it purely from their world narrative, as in Scottish independence is the only narrative they care about. They don't think, well, if I'm Putin, the breakup of the UK is beneficial to me. This Alex Salmond guy is pretty anti-trident and anti-nuclear weapons. That benefits me a lot.
Yeah.
So that's the other side of it. But it was the BBC's failure to really represent the Scottish independence movement correctly that actually led to this. They are called the British Broadcasting Corporation, so everything is going to be slanted. But I think ultimately their decision to slant it that much, I think, has been self-destructive. I think in the short term, I can see why they thought that was a great play. I think in the long term, I think it's done pretty insurmountable damage. And I actually think a lot of Scotland's reaction to the Indie Ref in 2014 has a lot to do with the perception of how people are seeing the BBC's coverage of Corbyn and Labour.
Yeah.
I think Owen Jones, his whole, like, the BBC are against us. That shtick, we were doing that years ago, man. You stole our gimmick. You know, I mean, I think that's what a lot of the far left in England have actually seen, that this anti-BBC attitude actually gets you a lot of the retweets and a lot of the shares, and you can put a blog about it. And I think that all of that is due to the BBC's feelings in Scotland. The George Square rallies, which I've certainly been to and taking photographs of, these were a big deal. I mean, these were like, they were lots and lots of people out there. It wasn't like just like, you know, a couple of grannies and their grandchild or whatever else. I mean, this was a big deal. And a lot of the imagery and the way the BBC website presented it did, I think, very knowingly underestimate the numbers. They filmed it and shot it and photographed it in a way to downplay it. And generally the whole Indie Ref thing, the vibe and tone's a key word, as you said there, it felt very much like, this is going to be a thing, but Britain's going to be forever, so let's move on. It never felt like the whole thing was taken seriously. And the only thing I will say to defend the BBC slightly on that is that was the attitude that Westminster took the whole fucking thing as well. Until the final week, that was the only real vibe you got. Oh, fuck, this is a thing.
Those last few days when basically a few folk in London sort of went, they might fucking win this thing. And Nick Robinson and his band of goblins fucking emerged from the trains to then rehash all the things that, you know, like, we'd spent 2 fucking years talking about it. But wait, Nick is here, you know, and we did no, mate, we've done that. We've sorted that one out already. Fuck off, you know. So
you can make exactly the same argument with Remain and Leave.
Yep.
Because the default setting of everyone at Westminster was, of course we're going to vote Remain.
Yeah.
So therefore, the BBC coverage was always slanted with that tone, and tone is the key thing to all this. The BBC's arrogant dismissal of Leave actually fueled Leave.
But
the same thing happened with the BBC in Scotland, that by dismissing this and by looking down upon it, that actually, it fuels the fire. And if they had just done their fucking job, and they didn't have to really cater to it, they just had to respect it on the same level as the bollocks coming out of Westminster. And if you actually, again, comes back to our whole narrative bias thing, if you think everyone's a dick, well, Hollywood are dicks, Westminster dicks. If you cover it like that, you're safe as houses, right?
Yeah.
But because they went, no, the Scottish ones are way more dicky than they are, that's why they fucked themselves over. But I hate the way the BBC refuse, point blank. They don't want to acknowledge it was their own fucking fault. They've created a lot of the fucking mess that we're now currently in. I mean, I think it's true to a general degree that a lot of their fact-finding and so forth generally is kind of all right. But your use of the term tone there, I think, is absolutely what the problem is, that they cannot do that again.
Well, one of the, I mean, with regards to the Remain Leave with the Brexit vote, they learned all the wrong lessons from the Scottish independence campaign with regards to, they thought, yeah, we put the fear of God into them and we won. Yeah, no. You lost 20 points in that race. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You moved from mid-20s to mid-40s because you ran such a terrible fucking campaign. And then when you had a much closer vote, you ran the same campaign.
Guys, it's Blair McDougall.
Oh, Blair.
Shout out to Blair McDougall, by the way. He still has it on his Twitter profile thing where he's like, yeah, I led the fucking vote no side to victory. It's like, dude, you started off from a place of guaranteed victory and almost fucking lost. Like, you literally, like, you won by default at best.
Yeah.
At worst, you almost lost from a place of guaranteed victory.
Yeah. I think with the Sergei Skripal, my favourite nonsense bit was people saying, it's only 8 miles away from Porton Down. Right? And? Right. So what, you think it was an accident? Are you saying there was a leak? Because, yeah, we all know that Porton Down's there and Porton Down exists. If the government wanted to actually use toxic nerve agents on somebody, the distance from Portland down wouldn't be the consideration. Do you know what I mean? It's like, we'll go for Sergei because he's only 8 miles away from Portland down. We'll not have to carry that far. What's your actual argument?
This is amazing.
It's like, it's only 8 miles away from Portland down. Oh, right, well, that fucking proves it then. Do you know what I mean? If it was 12, would that be too far?
Wow. I didn't even know that was a thing.
That was a thing. That was making me fucking bang my head off the wall.
That's phenomenal.
The stupidity of the complete irrelevance of that. If I thought, it's only 8 miles away from Portland. All right, well, it's definitely a false flag operation then.
Fucking hell, that's beyond clutching at straws.
Yeah.
Like, you're clutching like having
absolutely. I mean, my take on it, the Sergei Skripal thing is, of course the fucking Russians did it. Of course they did it. It's the build up to their election. What we don't understand in this country is how big a deal Sergei Skripal was in Russia. He's like one of their biggest fucking traitors. Just because he was living in a semi down here and buying Cornish pasties at the local shop doesn't mean that in Russia he wasn't a big fucking deal. And him dying a couple of weeks before the election.
People don't understand how many Russian opposition or like dissidents.
Yeah, people aren't aware at all of how bad it is over there. Yeah,
assassinated.
The other thing about it was that obviously as the West's investigation into Russians' interference in Facebook and all this stuff, like, maybe this guy knew some stuff about that. It seems fairly plausible that if the Brits know, or the Americans know, we know this guy's living in the West and UK, we might want to question him.
Well, the thing to bear in mind as well is Christopher Steele, the guy who's behind, is the ex-MI6 agent. Mm-hmm. He used to run the Russia desk, who wrote the Steele dossier, which is causing so much trouble. The P-tapes dossier for Donald Trump. Christopher Steele.
That totally happened. I've got no proof, but it totally happened. He totally paid them to do that. Young bastard.
But Christopher Steele was the head of the Russia desk when Sergei Skripal was turned. There's no way they don't know each other. There's certainly no way that Steele doesn't know about him. But it is my understanding that Steele's organisation has said outright that he was absolutely not one of Steele's sources for the dossier, because Steele's sources are in Russia. He can't go to Russia anymore. His sources are still in Russia. Now, that being said, it is my understanding that Skripal may well have still been active in terms of getting information from Russian sources. But I can't, I don't know more than that. But certainly he knew Christopher Steele. But I actually just think it was a publicity stunt for Putin, and it was and it's one of these things where everybody knows he did it. It's mob behaviour. Everybody knows that they did it, and they can go, wasn't me, didn't see me, can't prove anything.
People say about it, but what would be his motivation? Why would he do this? I don't understand why he would do this. And they say the same thing about the Syria thing. But why would he do? Why would Assad do this? It's like, well, why? How the fuck do you know? I mean, it's like there's a situation going on that you're not a party to.
Yeah,
there's lots of things in there that could be motivation for someone to do.
And also will be like, it's like the MI5 did it. Why would they do that? And it's like, it's just weird how like it's the critical thinking is applied to. It's all narrative based. People are like, no, we have to wait until we have definitive proof that it definitely was Assad before we jump to any conclusions. Well, simultaneously jumping to the conclusion that it was definitely the CIA who were behind this, and it was absolutely MI5, and it's like, you can't have that both ways. Yeah. To say, I want to objectively wait for evidence, brilliant, that's a fantastic point. To then leap headlong into your wildest conspiratorial fantasy on the back of no evidence at all, that's when you fuck up. You can't say, wait for evidence, seek the truth, while leaping to conclusions. The evidence dictates what happens. You don't go like, what evidence fits my narrative and selectively picking it. One of the things I thought was really fascinating recently that I put out a couple of polls talking about like, who's the government that you trust the least? And it was like, I think the options were America, Britain, Russia, or Syria. And I think Britain far and away won the poll. And then the second was America, and then Russia, and then Syria. And I just thought it was quite fascinating that like all the people that say like, I really don't trust this British government, or I don't trust the American government, seem to like live in America and Britain. And I'm going like, maybe if you'd rather, if you think the Russian government are more trustworthy than your own or the Syrian government,
why you fuck off there?
You go in there and people let me cook and find out. I'm just like, it seems to be very easy to go like, I hate my government, they're really, really bad. That's great. What if you just take that view of all governments and see how you get on? And, I think that's, if you want to be critical thinking and actually, try and find truth, that's the mindset you go into. You don't go, oh no, the Russians have done anything wrong. They're lovely. Putin's probably a great guy. And I'm pretty sure the Russian elections are pretty much rigged. And
Yes.
we kind of know that. And newspaper articles are out there which you can go and read that really go in depth about all of this stuff. And people just seem to be choosing not to read them. And RT's not that bad because Mr. Salmon's got a show on it, so it must be great. And you're like, oh, fuck off. Really, if we're going to put Alex Jones on RT, the fucking, all bets are off at that stage.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend thing.
Yeah.
Seems to go on. And that's predominant in social media. But did you see the interview with that woman who was in a kind of like anti-war thing in London? And she was saying, how can you see Assad as a bad guy? He's
a doctor.
It's like, you don't need to take a side. All sides are arseholes.
Yeah.
Assad is a dick.
Yeah.
Putin's a dick. Theresa May's a dick. Nicola Sturgeon's a bit of a dick as well. All terrible, right? And like, in their own different ways. And you just need to kind of try and navigate.
The only way you can make government work is if you hold the government to account.
Yeah.
You don't selectively choose the government. You don't just go, all right, this government's all right, but that one's bad. It's like the only way across the world we can make it better is if we're critical of everybody. And I totally take your approach. It's just that you have to assume everyone's a dick.
Yeah.
And then try and find redeeming qualities as opposed to the other way around,
It's too binary, and the same thing happened with the anti-Semitism thing with Jeremy Corbyn. Folk were saying, oh, Jeremy Corbyn's not done enough about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And other folk were saying, oh, well, people are just using this as a tactic to attack him. Well, both of those things are true.
Yeah.
He's not done enough, and also folk will use this as a thing to attack them. Both of these things can be true. You don't need to take a side. Don't take sides. Just look at things and rationally...
It's not black and white. It's much more complicated than that.
I think it's more that we talk about black and white. I think what I'm seeing now is, because that's a really common term, like shades of grey or black and white. Like, you hear that a lot, but
people do want binary choices.
They want. I think it's more
good
like
guy wang.
They want. They want their life to have a narrative. Want like their worldview. So they select a narrative, and within this narrative, they're the good guys and they're the bad guys, and they make that decision most of the time with no research, no real factual information, no real in-depth understanding of the situation. It's simply like, based on the information that I've got through the internet or like biased sources, I'm going to form a narrative that makes sense for me emotionally, and what emotional rewards do I get out of things. And that's how narratives are chosen. And governments are very clever at manipulating that. And it's astounding how people are unable to just take a step back and have the simple life philosophy that everyone's a dick. And then if you just go from that, if that's your jumping off point, you're fine.
Don't trust anybody.
Don't trust anyone. And then when you really work someone down, when you really go, I know that person now I can kind of let them in, you'll be all right.
I think the Iraq War was kind of a turning point where folk saw that, mainstream media and the government
were lying to us.
That was kind of, for me especially, but I don't think it's a completely negative thing that at that point people started to think, oh, wait a minute, hold on, like the mainstream media does lie and the government lies. I think there's a good side to that and a bad side. The bad side is that folk then didn't have a place to
go to
find out the truth. If you no longer believe in the mainstream media point of view, where do you go? And a lot of people went to like Infowars and stuff like that.
I think there's a huge element of are you aware of the Dunning-Kruger effect?
I'm not, because I'm stupid and young.
No. It's a fantastic thing. I think psychologists Dunning and Kruger, who wrote a paper that observes that stupid people are more confident about their opinions. Uninformed people are more confident about their opinions because they don't understand the complexity of the thing. So they don't understand how little they know. Therefore, they don't understand that they're wrong. They have no capacity to understand that they're wrong because they don't know.
You don't even know enough to know that you don't know.
Exactly. And therefore, they'll be very, very confident about their very wrong opinions. But here's the other problem, right? Human beings gravitate towards confidence, right? So a person that is confident about their opinions and states them boldly and firmly and doesn't really deviate from them is seen as strong and direct. the fact that they're much more likely to be stupid, ignorant, ill-informed and wrong isn't readily apparent. They seem confident of their opinion, so we are inclined towards thinking, well, they must be right. They seem really confident about that. Whereas the person that's hedging seems less likely to be correct, but they're more likely to be correct in their analysis because they have an analysis. The fact that they have an analysis, which you may have to sort of follow some backwards and forwards on before you reach a conclusion in it, that means they're more likely to be right because they've thought about it.
So much of social media, and it's now going to almost every kind of media, is so emotion driven.
It's outcome orientated
reward, and we want someone to pat us in the back and go, yes, Steve, your ignorant opinion's right. And so many people on your Facebook page think you're really cool, and it's not actually about discovering reality. Say for your whole life you've been like, I don't know, you've been a Lib Dem for whatever reason, right? And
so they're out there.
Okay, I thought I'd pick on them because there's not so many, so it might soften the blow for the rest of the listeners. This might be relevant to them. But like, if you get into being a Lib Dem when you're in your teens, you just thought Lib Dems, oh man, nothing cool than being a Lib Dem. Oh man, these Lib Dem girls, they're lovely. I want to be in the Lib Dem crowd. All the policies, such cool Lib Demness. Oh yeah. And then suddenly you find yourself, like, you get into it, you start campaigning, you're actively knocking on people's doors to tell them that they too should be a Lib Dem. And actually, by not being a Lib Dem, you might be part of the problem because Lib Dems have it right. And then the next thing you know, you're dating a Lib Dem. And suddenly you're married to a Lib Dem and you've made Lib Dem children. What if you got to like 45 and you just had a moment and you realised it was all bollocks? How do you escape it? And I reckon this must happen, right, where people get to that point with Labour, Tory, Christian, Islam, whatever, they just get to that stage in their life where they have that horrible realisation that everything they've built for 40 years is fucking wrong.
Yeah, you're too invested in it by that point.
You bought into your own bullshit so much that you can't stop. And I think this is where like your Tony Blairs, for example, start to kind of filter in here a little bit, or your Trumps, or even your Alex Jones Infowars guys, where it's like, you can't stop. It's fucking got you now. Because unless you go into everything, questioning everything and not trusting everything, you're so fucking close to losing your mind. Because your whole reality can just become this bullshit bubble where you just surround yourself with people that are going to pat you in the back and tell you got it right about everything. But I walk around the planet and it's like you can kind of see them and go, oh, you're one of those people. Like, they're confident in what they're saying, but then you probe it. And the minute you start to question it, you can see them very quickly getting don't really know what I'm talking about here, but everyone else around me normally says it's all fine.
I think we've kind of diagnosed a problem in that people are kind of trapped by their biases and they will, they're struggling to find out truth and like who is telling the truth. There's a lot of kind of lies and deception that goes on everywhere, and people are not very good at particularly finding out, where the valid sources are. But like, what do you then do about that?
The way all this is going is like all the stuff we're talking about, the lies, the deception, the narrative driven, it's all towards changing the environment to benefit yourself. The problem is we're doing it through the media government. So therefore we change it for everybody. And then for 4 years, the rest of us just have to sit by and fucking suck it up and take it. And it's all about enforcement of a viewpoint on the world. Like, we have to centralise everything to Westminster. And then we'll elect dipstick number one in. And dipstick number one has this particular narrative that they've emotionally bought into. And they're going to enforce it on everybody else. And that's where we're at globally right now. That is the White House. That is Putin. It's everywhere. It's like that. It's enforcing a bullshit narrative because I'm not going to lie to you all. 99% of your narratives are all bullshit. That it's enforcing other people. I don't so much have a problem with a bullshit narrative. It's like we said earlier about religion. It's like, if you want to believe in, your Jesus, or if you're Islam, your winged horses fly to heaven, if you want to go and believe in that, just don't make me have to be part of it.